There's a company in 1870 that did something no company had done before. It controlled an entire industry, Standard Oil, founded by John D. Rockefeller, a bookkeeper from Cleveland, Ohio, who became the richest man in American history. At its peak in 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining in the United States, 85% of oil sales, the railroads that transported oil, the pipelines that moved it, the barrels it was sold in, the retail stores that sold it, everything from the oil well to the customer's lamp. One company controlled it all, and John D. Rockefeller owned 25% of that company, making him worth $900 million by 1913. That's $400 billion in today's money. Richer than Jeff Bezos, richer than Elon Musk, richer than anyone who has ever lived. But here's what they don't teach you in business school. Rockefeller didn't build Standard Oil by having better oil. He built it by controlling everything around the oil. The refineries, the transportation, the distribution, the retail. This is called vertical integration. When you control every step from raw material to final customer. And when you control every step, you control the costs. And when you control the costs, you can undercut any competitor until they go bankrupt or sell to you for pennies on the dollar. But here's the irony. When the government broke up Standard Oil in 1911, it made Rockefeller richer because he owned shares in all 34 companies it was broken into. And those 34 companies became more valuable, competing against each other, than Standard Oil was as one monopoly. Rockefeller won by losing. Every monopoly begins the same way. Buy every competitor. If they won't sell, destroy them. John D. Rockefeller started in oil refining in 1863 in Cleveland, Ohio. At the time, hundreds of small refineries across America processed crude oil into kerosene, the fuel that lit America's lamps. Competition was fierce, prices volatile, profits thin. But Rockefeller saw an opportunity. Most refineries operated inefficiently. Small scale, high costs, poor quality control. Rockefeller believed that if he built the most efficient refinery in Cleveland, he could outlast everyone else. So he reinvested every dollar of profit into efficiency. Larger refineries, better equipment, economies of scale. By 1870, his refinery was the largest in Cleveland. But being the largest in Cleveland wasn't enough. In 1872, he formed the South Improvement Company, a secret alliance between Standard Oil and the major railroads. The railroads gave Standard Oil massive rebates on shipping costs. Not just discounts, rebates on competitors' shipments too. Every time a competitor shipped oil, Standard Oil got a kickback. Competitors were literally funding Standard Oil's advantage. Then Rockefeller made his move. He went to every refinery in Cleveland, one by one, and made an offer. Sell to me now at a fair price, or I'll drop my prices until you go bankrupt. Then I'll buy your refinery for nothing. This wasn't a bluff. Rockefeller had the railroad rebates. He had the economies of scale. He could operate at a loss longer than any competitor could survive. Most sold. Within 3 months, February to April 1872, Rockefeller bought 22 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. This became known as the Cleveland Massacre, not through violence, through economics, through controlled destruction of anyone who refused to join. That's stage one, when you buy or destroy every competitor. By 1872, Rockefeller controlled Cleveland, but Cleveland was just the beginning. Stage two is when consolidation becomes control, when you don't just own competitors, you own the entire supply chain. By 1875, Standard Oil controlled most oil refining in America, but Rockefeller didn't stop there. He realized refining was just one step. If he controlled every step, he'd control everything. So he started integrating vertically, upstream. He bought oil fields and crude oil production, so he didn't have to buy from independent drillers. Downstream, he built pipelines to move oil from fields to refineries without using railroads. He manufactured barrels because every gallon of oil needed a container. Why buy barrels from someone else when you can make them cheaper yourself? He built storage facilities and warehouses to hold oil inventory, controlling supply to manipulate prices. He created distribution networks, wholesale dealers, retail stores, and direct-to-customer sales. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled the oil wells, pipelines, refineries, barrels, warehouses, and distribution, every single step from the ground to the customer's lamp. This created an insurmountable competitive advantage. If you were a competitor refinery, you had to buy crude at market prices while Standard Oil produced its own. You had to pay railroads full price, while Standard Oil had pipelines. You had to buy barrels from suppliers while Standard Oil made its own. Standard Oil's costs were 50 to 70% lower than those of its competitors. They could sell at prices competitors couldn't match and still make huge profits. Competitors had three choices: sell to Standard Oil, go bankrupt, or operate at the margins in areas Standard Oil didn't yet care about. By 1890, Standard Oil accounted for 88% of oil refining in America. Not through better oil, through better structure. That's stage 2. When you don't just dominate one step but control the entire process. And systems always beat products. Stage 3 is when control becomes power, when you can set prices anywhere, and competitors can't respond. By 1890, Standard Oil had a playbook for entering new markets. Step 1. Price below cost. Standard Oil would identify a city where independent refineries still operated. Buffalo, New York. Local refineries sold kerosene at 10 cents per gallon, making a small profit. Standard Oil would enter Buffalo and sell at 6 cents per gallon, below their own cost, operating at a loss. Step 2. Bankrupt the competition. Local refineries couldn't compete at 6 cents. Their costs were 8 cents per gallon. They'd go bankrupt within months. Step 3. Buy the bankrupted refineries. Rockefeller would buy the assets for pennies on the dollar. Refineries worth $100,000 sold for $10,000. Step 4. Raise prices. Once Standard Oil owned all refineries in Buffalo, they'd raise prices to 12 cents, higher than before, because now there was no competition. Step 5. Move to the next city. Rochester, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Same playbook everywhere. This is predatory pricing, and it was legal because there was no law against it. But Rockefeller had another advantage: cross-subsidization. Standard Oil operated in 20 states. If they lost money in Buffalo selling below cost, they made up for it by raising prices in Cleveland, where they had a 100% market share. Use profits from monopoly regions to fund price wars in competitive regions, until all regions become monopoly regions. Competitors couldn't do this because they only operated in one city. They couldn't afford to lose money. Standard Oil could lose money in one place and make it back in 20 others. That's stage 3, when you can raise prices where you dominate and lower them where competition exists. Use profits from one to fund destruction in the other. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining, and Rockefeller was worth more than the GDP of most countries. Stage 4 is when the public realizes what's happened, and the government is forced to act. By 1900, Standard Oil was the most hated company in America. Not by competitors, they were gone. By the public, because monopolies don't just hurt businesses, they hurt consumers. Standard Oil controlled kerosene prices, the fuel that lit every American home. When they raised prices, families had to pay more and had no alternative. In 1902, journalist Ida Tarbell published a series of articles, The History of the Standard Oil Company in McClure's magazine, exposing the secret railroad deals, predatory pricing, forced buyouts, and consolidation tactics. The series ran for 19 months and turned public opinion against Rockefeller. He went from respected businessman to robber baron, not because he broke laws, but because he exposed what was legal, and people realized the laws needed to change. In 1890, Congress had passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, the first federal law against monopolies, but it was vaguely worded and rarely enforced, until Theodore Roosevelt became president in 1901. Roosevelt was a trust buster who believed monopolies threatened democracy. In 1906, the federal government sued Standard Oil under the Sherman Act. The case took 5 years. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil must be broken up into 34 separate companies. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon, Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco. Every piece of the empire, now a separate company, forced to compete. This was the first time the U.S. government successfully broke up a monopoly. It set the precedent that even legally established monopolies could be dismantled. That's stage 4. When allowing one company to control an industry threatens the economy, the government acts. But the government's victory had an unintended consequence. Stage 5 is the irony. When breaking up the monopoly makes the monopolist richer. In 1911, when Standard Oil was broken up into 34 companies, John D. Rockefeller owned about 25% of the company. After the breakup, he owned 25% of each of the 34 new companies. At first, this seemed like a loss. Then something unexpected happened. The 34 companies started competing, and competition made them more efficient, more innovative, more valuable. Standard Oil of New Jersey, later Exxon, became one of the most profitable companies in the world. Standard Oil of New York, later Mobil, did the same. Chevron, Amoco, all became industry leaders, and Rockefeller owned shares in all of them. Before the breakup in 1911, Rockefeller's net worth was estimated at $300 to $400 million. By 1913, 2 years after the breakup, his net worth had grown to $900 million. He'd more than doubled his wealth by losing the monopoly. How? Because the stock market realized that 34 competing companies were more valuable than one monopoly. Investors had been afraid to invest in Standard Oil. Too large, too powerful, too vulnerable to government action. But 34 smaller companies? That was investable. Stock prices soared, and Rockefeller, who owned shares in all of them, became the richest man in the world. He won by losing. That's stage 5. When forced separation creates more value than monopoly control. When the monopolist owns shares in the pieces and profits from fragmentation. By the time Rockefeller died in 1937, the companies he'd created were the backbone of the American oil industry. The monopoly was broken, but the monopolist won. Standard Oil's pattern is repeating with big tech. Amazon. Stage 1. Consolidation. Started as an online bookstore in 1994, dominated by 2000, then bought Zappos, Whole Foods, Ring, dozens more. Stage 2. Vertical integration. Built AWS for cloud computing, Amazon Logistics for delivery, fulfillment centers for warehousing, Amazon Basics for private label products. From cloud infrastructure to the product in your hand. Stage 3. Pricing power. Amazon sells products at a loss in retail, while AWS makes massive profits. Cross-subsidization. Just like Standard Oil used profits from Cleveland to fund price wars in Buffalo. Stage 4. Antitrust response. The FTC sued Amazon in 2023, alleging antitrust violations. Google. Stage 1. Consolidation. Dominated search by 2000, then bought YouTube, DoubleClick, Waze, Android. Stage 2. Vertical integration. Controls search with 92% market share. Advertising where they sell ads on search. YouTube where ads are shown. Chrome browser where you search. Android, the mobile OS where you search. From the device, to the ad, to the revenue. Stage 3. Pricing power. Google pays Apple $18 billion per year to be the default search on iPhone. Uses search profits to fund YouTube losses for years. Stage 4. Antitrust response. DOJ antitrust trial in 2023, alleging Google monopolizes search illegally. In August 2024, Google was found to have maintained an illegal monopoly. Stage 5. Breakup profit pending. If Amazon is broken up, AWS separates from retail, logistics becomes independent, marketplace becomes standalone. Bezos owns shares in all of them, just like Rockefeller. If Google is broken up, search, YouTube, Android, advertising become separate companies. Alphabet owns shares in all of them, and the combined value might exceed current market caps. Same as Rockefeller. The pattern is identical. Standard Oil, 1870 to 1911. Consolidate, integrate, price power, antitrust, breakup profit. Amazon and Google, 1994 to today. Consolidate, integrate, price power, antitrust active, breakup pending. Vertical integration builds monopolies. Monopolies trigger antitrust. Antitrust breaks companies apart, but the founders profit from the pieces. Standard Oil proved this in 1911. Big tech might prove it again in the years ahead. If you've watched this far, you understand the monopoly consolidation cycle. You see how Standard Oil in 1870 and Amazon today follow the exact same 5 stages. Subscribe to Capital Origins, because when the next antitrust decision comes, when the next big tech breakup is announced, you'll want to know which stage we're in and what historically happens next. Vertical integration always creates monopolies. Monopolies always trigger antitrust. Antitrust always breaks companies apart. And breakups always make the monopolists richer. Hit subscribe, because Rockefeller proved this over a century ago. And big tech is about to prove it again. You just need to recognize the pattern before the breakup happens. And the value is created.